Welcome to our Sri Lankan cookery course. We're going to show you how to make Kukul mas. It's a Sri Lankan chicken curry that we were privileged to learn how to make firsthand in the hills of Sri Lanka near Kandy, the old capital city actually. Okay, so let's go through the ingredients. We have some raw basmati rice, some desiccated coconut, some chopped green chilli, some roasted Sri Lankan curry powder, some chilli, some turmeric, and those spices are going to be ground and form our marinade for our chicken. That's a mixture of leg and thigh meat. And then when we get to make the curry, we have a whole spice masala here, our first masala, which is cinnamon, cloves and cardamom, finely chopped red onion, and then our masala of lemongrass, curry leaves, goreca, which is similar to tamarind, and rampe or pandanus leaf, also known as Asian vanilla, which has a lovely aromatic note to the curry. And then we'll finish it with some tomatoes and some coconut milk. Okay, so our first step is going to be to grind our basmati rice. Now you could do this in a mortar and pestle, though it's quite hard work. It is much easier to do it in a spice grinder, or if you have a coffee grinder you can spare to use, but life will be much simpler, be quicker. So we've given that a little whiz to break it down a little bit, and then we're going to add the other ingredients to our marinade, which is some desiccated coconut, some green chilli, and then our ground spices. So that's turmeric, some chilli, and this wonderful roasted Sri Lankan curry powder. Now we've included this in your kit, and we've also included a recipe for you, so when it runs out you'll be able to make some more. And the roasted curry powder is used for meat dishes in Sri Lanka. We have another curry powder that we're going to talk about in another recipe, which is used for vegetarian dishes. Okay, so that's everything into the grinder. We're really doing this just to blend the mixture together now. So that's just brought it all together for us, and we're simply going to mix this with our chicken and then pop that in the fridge, give it a good mix through, pop it in the fridge and leave that to marinate overnight if you have time, but alternatively just leave it for an hour or so, and then we can crack on with the remainder of the curry. Okay, over at the stove now, one ingredient I missed off the list was our cooking oil. We're just using 5 tablespoons of rapeseed oil. Now you could use coconut oil too, however we're going to be adding coconut milk towards the end, so it's all about balance, and we feel the rapeseed oil gives a good starting point for the curry. So as the oil heats up, we're going to add our whole spices, so our cinnamon, cardamom and cloves, and we'll just let those heat through and release the oils from the spices to flavour the oil. Okay, so I can smell the wonderful aroma coming off that Sri Lankan cinnamon now. We're going to add our finely chopped red onion. Now, if you can get them, shallots work really well in the Sri Lankan recipes too. In fact, when we learnt to cook this near Kandy, it was shallots that we were using. They're not always easily available here, and they can be quite expensive, but we find this finely chopped red onion is a good substitute. So we're just going to let that start to warm through and soften, and as it does that, we'll add our second masala. So we're going to use lemongrass, and lemongrass is a very common spice in these Sri Lankan curries, and you can see how the Southeast Asian and Indian influences are mixed within Sri Lankan cooking, because we wouldn't tend to see lemongrass in mainland Indian cooking. So we'll put the lemongrass in, some curry leaves, which you'll be familiar with if you've done our Kerala course, our goreca, which is similar to tamarind, that's our souring agent, And then these are we've dried them so we can include them in the kit for you. This is pandanus leaf, pieces of pandanus leaf, and that's also known as Asian vanilla. Gives a wonderful aroma to the curry. So we're just going to let all that mix together, heat through before we add our chicken. Okay, I wish we had smell-o-vision actually, because then you'd be able to smell the wonderful aroma that's coming off the lemongrass and the rampe and the cinnamon. One thing you might have noticed if you read through the ingredients list is that this curry has no garlic and no ginger. It's the lemongrass and the rampe which really are giving it the flavour. And actually, one of the ladies that taught us how to cook this dish said that the reason for that is that in many Sri Lankan dishes, the lemongrass is used without ginger, because otherwise the ginger just overpowers the flavour of the lemongrass. And so you get quite a unique flavour profile from this curry. And if you're going through the course and you're going to be cooking the harrat mas, they really complement each other very well, because they're quite different styles. So I think we're ready to pop the chicken in now, as our onions are cooked through nicely. So we'll pop our chicken in, which has been marinating in the fridge. We're using a mixture of leg, thigh and breast meat here, which gives a nice flavour and texture to the finished dish. There we go. And you'll have noticed that we are using ground rice in our marinade, and that's a common feature of these Sri Lankan meat dishes. And the ground rice is used to help thicken the sauce, and you see how it's coats the chicken beautifully, and it pulls all of those ground spices to the chicken. So we're just going to let that seal before we add our next ingredient. Our chicken is sealing nicely now, and we're getting a wonderful aroma off the spice mix as it roasts and heats through. So our next ingredient now, some chopped tomatoes. So we've using some chopped and peeled fresh tomato here. I do recommend using that fresh tomato in this dish rather than tin tomatoes. I find that using tin tomato in this dish is a little bit strong and overpowering, because the spicing is quite subtle. There we go. So we'll just let that cook a little more on a slightly lower heat. Just going to add a teaspoon of salt at this stage. That will help draw the moisture out of the tomatoes and help them break down. Okay, so we'll turn the heat down a little bit and just let that cook through for a few minutes. There we go, our tomatoes are cooking down nicely, keeping our mixture moving. One of the slight snags with the Sri Lankan approach of using ground rice in the marinade is that if you're not using a non-stick pan, you do need to be careful that it doesn't stick and burn. Obviously you can get around that by using a little more oil, or just keeping it turning, and then when you add liquid later in the cooking you can use that to help deglaze the pan. But just be aware that is a feature of this style of cooking. Okay, so I'm going to turn the heat right down now, and we're going to add our coconut milk. So I've got 300 ml of coconut milk here, and I've made that with a coconut milk powder that you can buy in most supermarkets. I prefer to use that because it allows me to control the thickness and the richness of the coconut milk. Now if you want to use tin, that's fine, but raw tinned coconut milk as it comes out of the tin is really what we would call in Southeast Asian cooking a thick coconut milk, and that's too creamy, too rich for this dish. So for 300 ml, what I would do is use 150 ml of tinned coconut milk diluted with 150 ml of water, and that will give you a coconut milk mixture, which is what you'd call a thin coconut milk, and similar to what I'm using here with the coconut milk powder, and we give you the quantities of that in the recipe. Right, that's mixed through nicely. What we're going to do now is just pop the lid on and let that simmer away until our chicken is cooked. Okay, so our kukul mass has been simmering away for about 5 minutes there, and I think we're just about there. So first thing we'll do is we're just going to check to make sure our chicken is cooked through. We do that with a temperature probe. You can just break the chicken apart to have a look at it, but we want the chicken to be above 75 degrees, and that's just about there. So we'll just give it a taste and see if we need to adjust the seasoning at all. Always my favourite bit of any cooking session is the tasting. And yes, just a little more salt, so I'm just going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So that's in addition to the teaspoon earlier on. Give that a stir through, and just make sure we've got that seasoning right. Perfect. Okay, so there we have it. Now before we're finished, there's one thing that's easier to do at this stage, and that is to fish out a couple of these whole spices that are not too, you don't really want to leave in for the guest or your friends and family to find on the plate. One of them is we've got 2 pieces of gorecha, which are a little bit chewy and bitter if you leave them in, and the other thing is we have our cinnamon stick. So this is a little bit of a fishing expedition. There's our cinnamon stick, and we'll find our other piece of gorecha before we serve this up. So I hope you enjoy it. Sri Lankan chicken curry kukul mass.